Thank you, Jeff, and our ladies ensemble. Uh, I don't know, 18 or 20 months ago, if you remember, I began to describe the experience of, and you began to witness me going through a process of losing some weight. For me, that was something that was prompted by my doctor's urging. He wanted me to lose 20 to 25 pounds. And so I began to make some changes and start working towards that goal. Over a period of months, I wound up losing between 40 and 43 pounds. So I've gone well beyond what the doctor had even encouraged me to attempt. And so I'm really excited when I'm getting ready to go back to the doctor. And most of the time, you're not glad to go back to the doctor, but I really am, because I am anticipating a particular level of response from the doctor. After all, how many times do doctors see patients and they say to the patient, hey, you need to lose weight, and they never do? I mean, like 98% of the time, right? And so I'm thinking, I'm part of this 2% who's not simply done what the doctor said. I have exceeded the goals that he has set forth before me. So there should be a particular level of response from the doctor. In all honesty, this is about the type of response I anticipated, and quite frankly, I felt was warranted. You've been to restaurants before when it was someone's birthday. Maybe you have. Don't get ahead of me. Maybe it was you, a family member, a group from work. You go to a restaurant and you let the waiter or the waitress know, hey, it's so-and-so's birthday. And once the meal has been served, the wait staff, they all come out, happy birthday, dun, 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 and it just a big hoo-ha over somebody's birthday. Now, given the fact that the doctor said lose 20 to 25 and I've lost 43, I felt like the appropriate response was that once the doctor saw that in the chart, he would say, hold on just a moment, and then he and the nurses all come in there chanting my name. I felt like that was a reasonable response. In truth, what wound up happening is that once they call me back, the nurse has me stand on the scale. She puts that in the chart. Once the doctor comes in to see me, he looks at the chart and he says, yeah, you're doing good on the weight loss. No, I'm doing great. But I didn't get the response I anticipated. But, it's been 18, 20 months or so. 43 that was the most weight that I lost. And in all honesty, I've gained a little bit of it back. But by and large, been holding my own. And so that's been encouraging. But what has enabled me not simply to lose the weight, but to keep it off are some motivations that I have. And really, there are three primary motivations. And I'll start with I'll rank them from least to most consequential. Least consequential, but not unimportant, is the fact that it's good for my overall health. I mean, to have lost that weight puts me better physically, in wonderful shape. And, I look more like Adonis than I did before. And so I thought there would be at least one amen, not laughter, but anyhow, so it's good for my overall health. That motivates me. Another thing that motivates me is that I don't like getting fussed at. You don't like getting fussed at. And most of the time when we go to the doctor, they're fussing at us about something, aren't they? And so I don't want to keep going back and him saying, hey, you need to lose weight. I told you that 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 18 months ago, 24 months ago. It's about time to start. And so me staying in good stead with the doctor, that motivates me. But there's another thing. In fact, I would say the most consequential thing that has motivated me. And that is when I was losing all that weight, my clothes don't fit any longer. And so I'm beginning to look like a rap star, and my clothes are just falling off. My pants are so baggy. Suits, the jackets were just draping on me. And because of that, I mean, some things I had to buy some smaller sizes. But my suits, I've spent a lot of money over a varied number of years buying a lot of suits, and so I don't want to have to replace them. I go take them to get altered. And I don't know, I've got quite a number of suits. And over a period of weeks and months, I spent between $500 and $600 getting alterations done on suits. That's a chunk of change to drop. How does that motivate me? I operate with this premise. If my rear end gets bigger, my wallet gets smaller. If I get bigger, it's going to cost me. This is what I want you to recognize this morning. There is something that will cost you far more than your backside getting bigger. And what will cost you more than that is your head getting bigger. You and I getting to a point in a place where our perspective of ourselves and our egos get so inflated, it will cost us in real, intangible, and consequential ways. This morning we're beginning a new series, and we're going to be walking through the life of the Old Testament character Joseph. And let me just kind of establish for you the premise of Joseph in this series, and it's this. Joseph went through an awful lot of experiences. He went through inflated ego. He knew what it was like to experience betrayal, false accusation, even false imprisonment. He knew what it was like to experience accomplishment and success. He knew what it was like to have to go through a painful process of extending forgiveness. He experienced an entire panoply of events in his life. Now, with that in mind, oftentimes how we operate is with this premise in mind, that we just live and learn. We're kind of operating in life, going through the school of hard knocks, and if we do this right, okay, I need to remember that, to do that in the future. If I do this wrong and that costs me, I hope I learn from that and don't make that mistake again. What I want you to recognize is that God doesn't want us to live that way. And one of the reasons that He has given to us His Word, that it includes these accounts of individuals' lives, is so that we can see their experiences, the successes, but in particular the failures, and we can say this, better you than me. I'm going to learn from your example so that I don't have to go through the school of hard knocks myself. And so that's what we're going to be doing over the coming weeks in Joseph's life. But as we start out of the gate, we discover that this is a man that's got a super inflated ego. I mean, Joseph's head would not fit in this room because he thought so high and mighty of himself. And we see not only in his life how that started, we see the great costs of that. So how did it start? What did it cost him? Because we can see how it might start in us and what it might cost us. Better him pay the price than you. Look with me in your Bibles today to Genesis chapter 37. Genesis chapter 37, and we'll begin with verse 1. Genesis 37. Verse 1 says, "Now when Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan," this is the history of Jacob. "Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. Now Israel," that's Jacob, "he loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. He also made for him a tunic, a cloak of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, 'Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf.' And his brothers said, 'Will you indeed reign over us? Shall you indeed have dominion over us?' And they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, 'Look, I have dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, the 11 stars bowed down to me.' So he told it to his fathers and his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said, 'What is this dream you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to earth before you?' And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind." As I said a moment ago, Joseph is a guy with a big head. He's got an inflated ego, and we see from his experience how this starts and also what it costs us. So how do you see that? Where do we find that in that passage? Well, let me start with this. An inflated ego results from uncritical assessments. An inflated ego results from uncritical assessments. Joseph really comes to us, the whole record of his life, as an individual that serves as a great hero, not simply of the Old Testament, but of the entire Bible. And we can say that by and large, not because of this particular incident, but because of how he through his mistakes and failures and through the experiences God led him through, he becomes a real example and a real record of what faith in God looks like and how God can work even in adversity. A lot of you are probably familiar with some aspects of Joseph's life. You might have read this chapter and those that follow in Genesis, but so that we're on the same page, I want to make sure that we've got some context. Joseph's father is a man named Jacob. Many years before, Jacob meets this woman whose name is Rachel, and he falls in love with her and decides, hey, this is the woman that I want to marry, that I want to spend the rest of my life with. And so as it comes time for the wedding, Rachel's father, a man named Laban, does this terrible trick, perpetrates this hoax, and instead of marrying Rachel, what Jacob winds up doing is marrying her sister, Leah. Well, now he's already married to her. Well, as the story unfolds, he's finally able later to marry Rachel. But Rachel is barren. She's not able to give to Jacob any children, particularly any sons, and this breaks her heart. She prays that God might open her womb, but for years that does not happen. She's able to watch, though, that Jacob and Leah, they're able to have children. He's able to have sons. There's the maidservants that he's able to have sons with, and he's got all of these kids, but she's not able to give him any. And so finally, God responds to her desires and to the prayers of her heart, and he opens her womb. She's able to conceive, and she gives birth to a son. What is this little boy that is Joseph? And he very much was a miracle child, because at this point, Jacob is an old man, and he has this son from his favored wife, Rachel. And so this little boy really becomes the apple of his father's eye. Rachel is able to conceive one more time, and she's going to give birth to another son, this time a little boy that becomes named Benjamin, but she dies in childbirth. And so by the time we get to chapter 37, Jacob is an old man, and Joseph is a teenager. He's 17 years old. He's got his driver's license now for about a year. And in verse 2, we're introduced to the nature of this teenager. The first thing that we discover about him is that he's a tattletale. He's out with his brothers tending the sheep, and we don't know what they did, whether it was big or small. Maybe they were sheep tipping. We don't know exactly what they were doing, but whatever it is, he comes back and he has to tell Daddy, "You're not going to believe what they did." And so he starts ratting out his brothers. That was Joseph's nature. He was a tattletale. But in verse 3, we're told that Jacob loved Joseph more than all of his children. Loved him more than all of his children. And we come to discover this is not a state secret. This is not something that just Joseph and his father are aware of. Everybody knows that Joseph is the favorite. If they didn't know it before, they come to discover it when his father gives to him what verse 3 describes as a tunic or a cloak, a garment of many colors. Now that's noteworthy on several different levels. First of all, it was a multicolored garment. Now, many of you are aware of the fact that garment dyes, fabric dyes at this point in history were very rare and very expensive. And so if someone had a garment that was red or purple or blue, it was some particular color, it would have cost a small fortune. But it is ridiculously expensive, the thought that someone would have a garment with multiplied different colors. But that's what Joseph has, this cloak, this garment of many, many colors. Now, beyond that, the word that's used there, that's translated here in verse 3 in the New King James as a tunic, is a garment that refers to an article of clothing relative to length. It goes down to the ankles on the legs and then down to the wrists on the arms. Now think about it. If you are wearing on a regular basis a garment that is worth not simply a small but a large fortune, furthermore, it goes down to your ankles and all the way down to your wrists, how much work, how much manual labor, how much farming, how much animal tending are you going to be doing? Probably not that much. This seems to indicate or hint in some small way that probably Joseph didn't have to do the same amount of work as what his brothers had to do. Now, on the surface, you could make a case as to why Jacob favored Joseph so. After all, we are told that in verse 3 that Joseph was the son of Jacob's old age. He was a miracle child. He's the son of Rachel, this woman that Jacob absolutely loved, that was so dear and so special to him. They thought they'd never be able to have children, and here he comes as a miracle from God into their lives. That would make him kind of special. But he's not just simply special and unique in his father's eyes, he's elevated to a higher degree. Now, in some cases, you could argue, well, that's kind of the baby. Some of you have grown up as maybe the middle or the older child, and there was a baby that came along, perhaps much later, and they were treated differently because they were the baby. But Joseph is not even the baby. Benjamin is the baby. When push comes to shove, we come to this conclusion: there is no good reason for Joseph's favored status. And you know why? Because there is no good reason for favoritism within the context of a healthy family. Now, this doesn't mean that Joseph couldn't have had a special and unique relationship, a unique bond with his father, but it does mean that it was absolutely unjustifiable for Jacob to do for Joseph what he would not do for the rest of his sons, for all of his other children. It was absolutely unjustifiable. Now, we can wag our fingers at Jacob and say, he was a bad dad, this is lousy parenting, and we would be right in that assessment, but we've got to recognize that it seems abundantly clear that Joseph was a willing participant in all of this. As you read this passage, it seems abundantly clear, not only is he receiving this favored treatment and these lavish gifts from his father, he seems to relish this. He seems to enjoy this. I don't believe whatsoever that Joseph, when he got this coat of many colors, that it just went into the closet and came out on special occasions. I think a special occasion for Joseph was Monday and Tuesday and Thursday afternoon and Wednesday night. I really believe this is probably what he wore all the time. And you've got to think of how this led his brothers to respond. I mean, they are hearing how his father dotes over Joseph. Furthermore, they're seeing him receive these gifts that they've never received anything like this. I mean, they get a set of fingernail clippers, and he gets this coat of many colors worth a small fortune. He is being treated differently by our father, and it seems that Joseph, because of this, is acting differently. Now, our father is communicating that he is special, that he is favorite, that he is elevated, that he is somehow better, but it seems that Joseph complicates, that he adds to this because he acts like he's better. He loves to parade around in this coat. He loves to communicate to his brothers and rub in their noses how he's the one that's in the elevated position. He's the choicest of all, the favored of all of the children. Joseph is not only told that he's better, he acts like he's better. Now, there's something in this that I believe is interesting that very easily we could pass over. Joseph is clearly receiving favored status and communicated in words and in gifts. Hey, you're better than the rest of your brothers. So he has that on the positive side. But on the negative side, he's got the ire and the contempt of his brothers, doesn't he? I mean, they are communicating to him, we don't like you. We don't like how this is unfolding. We think all of this stinks. We don't simply think you're not better than us. We probably think you're worse than us. We don't like you. So you would think, honestly, between these two extremes, from the favored treatment of his father to the deplorable treatment by his brothers, that somehow Joseph would wind up kind of averaging out and have kind of a grounded self-assessment. That what his father says and does is offset by what his brothers do, and he kind of winds up with a healthy self-assessment, a healthy perspective of himself. But that didn't happen. Why? Well, I believe the answer to that is because each of us, if we're honest, is wired to desire hearing only the positive things that are said about us and to us. I mean, how many love to hear people say, you're not very smart? How many people love to say, you don't look that good? How many people love to hear others say, you don't even smell good? I mean, we don't like hearing that. What we like and what we relish hearing are people waxing on about how wonderful we are. You are so smart. You are so beautiful. You are so handsome. You are so gifted. You are so talented. You are so efficient. You are so productive. You are so all of these things. We like to hear that. We relish hearing that, and we gravitate towards that. And in doing so, what often happens? We pay attention to that. We seek out that exclusively. And we don't pay any attention to anything that would be negative, anything that might ratchet that down, anything that might not at all communicate to us, hey, you're not actually the greatest thing since sliced bread. There's something that I do on a weekly basis that I believe, at least in some small way, helps me to be a better preacher. Each Sunday, the messages are video recorded, and they go onto a DVD. What I do afterwards is take that DVD and I convert it to a format that we're then able to upload on our website. You can probably go back a couple of years and see every sermon that has been preached here at Gate City over the past couple of years. But in the process of conversion, taking that DVD and getting it to an uploadable format, typically on each week, I will watch at least half of an entire sermon that I've preached. Sometimes the entire thing, or I'll drop in at several places. And so I see and I hear everything that I say and do on a weekly basis. I find that to be beneficial because some of you are excellent liars. And what will happen today is each week I will, after the service, I'll be at the back and I'll be greeting people. And I recognize that folks want to be gracious and courteous and kind and thoughtful. And sincerely, I appreciate that. I'll be doing the same thing as well. But consistently, I'll hear things like, thank you, pastors. That was such a good message. That really spoke to me. That was, you're just brilliant. That was, unparalleled insight. It was wonderful to bathe in the pool of your wisdom. Yeah, I hear that all the time. No, but sincerely, folks come by and they say these positive and encouraging things. And in all honesty, if I were to just stop after hearing that, I would leave this place most Sundays thinking, Charles Spurgeon got nothing on me. But then Sunday afternoon or Monday morning, I'll be watching that video, seeing and hearing all that was said, how it was delivered. Sometimes I'll even have Caroline tell me afterwards, you better watch that one. And as I watch it, there are some things that I will do in a message, and I think, that went well. I think that communicated clearly, did that how I'd hoped, how I'd planned. I think that resonated, that connected with people. But then there are other times that I will watch and I will listen and I will observe, and I think, man, I stunk the joint up today. That was terrible. I just butchered that. That didn't go at all how I'd planned, how I thought, how I'd hoped, I'd prayed, and that was just lousy. And so what I do is, in doing this, what am I seeking to accomplish? I'm trying to see myself and hear myself, not how I thought I was, not how others say that I am, but how I actually am. I'm seeking to critically assess myself. Now, not simply does that help me be a better preacher, but that type of mentality helps us to be better people. It keeps us from getting to the point where we need a bigger hat because our heads are too big and our egos get super inflated. It keeps us from having self-perceptions that can cause and will cause real pain and real trouble. Joseph was going to come to discover this over time. He didn't know it as a 17-year-old man, just how all this was working. But what was occurring in his life is that he was hearing these positive things, paying attention only to that, believing all of those things, being told, hey, you're better than everybody else, and then acting as though he's better than everyone else, and it's getting ready to cost him big time. Now, you've got a couple of options. You can figure that out on your own through the School of Hard Knocks, or you can pay attention to what God has recorded for us and recognize that these inflated egos, they come about because and they result from uncritical assessments. We need to see ourselves not as we think, not as others tell us, but as we actually are. And ultimately, what we need is God's help for that. And if we ask for it, I promise you, He will give it. There's something else we see, not simply how inflated awareness or egos come about, but we see now what they begin to cost. And the next thing we notice that an inflated ego results in divided relationships. An inflated ego results in divided relationships. You know, the truth is, even if the Bible did not tell us how all this played out, we could probably guess it. I mean, it takes little imagination to recognize, hey, this is not going to work out very well, and it's not going to be well received by the brothers. That when you've got one child that is favored, and they believe that they're better and then act like they're better, that the others are not going to respond very well at all. And we discover that that was the case. Verse 4 begins to describe what happens. It says, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now, in that, there's a couple of layers of application. And the first layer of application has to do with parents and with grandparents. Hear me in this. There is absolutely no room, zero space whatsoever in a healthy family with healthy relationships for demonstrations of favoritism. Zero room, no space whatsoever. And it doesn't make any difference because all children are different. All of my kids are different. Your children, your grandchildren, they're all different. Some are going to be better in school. Some are going to excel in a particular or multiplied sports. Some are going to listen easier. Some are going to respond to correction and discipline better than others. Some are going to have particular gifts and talents that others don't have. And very easy, very naturally, what you can do is to gravitate toward the one that's got the traits that you most appreciate and most value and communicate to them, hey, we got something special going on here. But listen, there is no room for that. If you want healthy relationships and healthy families, you got to recognize that cannot be and must not be a part of our lives. Each of our children, each of our grandchildren, they are each wonderfully unique and wonderfully a blessing from God, fearfully and wonderfully made in His image, and I'm going to treat everyone the same way. And I will not do for one what I will not do for the others. We've got to be consistent in that. So there's that layer of application, but there's a second layer, you see. Consider the end of verse 4. First of all, the brothers hated him. That was the response because he's treated, favored, in a favored position. He's told through actions and through words, you're better. He starts to behave and act and think that he's better. And then the result is, not only did they hate him, but we're told they could not speak peaceably to him. I mean, do you see that? They can't have even a civil conversation. They can't even be with each other politely. You know, every time Joseph walked into a room and he comes decked in this coat of many colors, hey guys, I think it might rain today. I hope you drown. Oh, I think we're going to have eggs this morning. You want me to cook some eggs? Yeah, and I hope you choke on them. I mean, it didn't make any difference what Joseph said. Everything that he did, everything that he said absolutely irked them and grated against their nerves. Because Joseph has been told, you're better. He believes all this. His head gets big and he acts like and parades in front of his others, hey, I am better. And they hated that. They began to hate him and they could not even speak peaceably to him. He was a constant irritant, and because of that, what is happening to this family? It is fracturing, it is dividing. Inflated egos result consistently in divided relationships. Let me ask you this, because I recognize that it's easier for me and for you to witness these types of traits in other people than it is to see it in ourselves. But let me ask you this. When I talk about an individual having an inflated ego, as we see the picture painted for us of how Joseph operated with a big head, you've probably got a Joseph in your life. Maybe they're in your family, maybe they work with you, maybe they go to school with you, but you've got a Joseph in your life. Let me ask you about that person. Do you like talking to them? I mean, do you relish spending time with them? I mean, is this somebody that you really view as a friend and somebody that you can have a real relationship with? Somebody that you recognize, hey, they care for me, they're invested in my life, and when push comes to shove, if I need them, they will be there for me? No, you don't feel at all like that about them. Why? Because you recognize they're more concerned with themselves than anyone and anything else. Everything revolves around them. You see that in others, but let me ask you this. Would others say of you that you're an individual that they enjoy spending time with? Would others say of you that you're an individual with whom it's easy to develop a real and meaningful relationship? Would others say of you that you're the type of person that's easy to befriend and that you are a person that they could depend on, that could rely on, that is not operating as an individual that everything revolves around them, but you're deeply invested and concerned about others? Now, if you recognize that there's not many people and maybe no one that would say that, well, it may very well be that you need to start working on getting a smaller hat. Your inflated ego is resulting in what Joseph experienced in divisive, divided relationships. 2 years ago next month, Caroline and I made the decision that we were going to get a dog. We recognized that, or at least from our perspective, part of the growing up experience oftentimes, and for us, involved having a dog growing up, and we wanted them to have that same experience. And so we found this little white puppy that we bought and brought home. We named her Flower Pot, and she is absolutely the sweetest dog she could possibly be. And she's a delightful little dog, and I love Caroline, all the kids. We love Flower Pot. She is an absolutely delightful animal. And I love her not simply because of her way and her disposition, but I love her because of how she makes me feel. When I leave in the mornings and then I'm gone all day and I get back home in the afternoons, typically I will find Flower Pot that we have a sunroom that I can see the windows through the windows in the driveway, and there's a table in there, and that's where Flower Pot likes to sit because she's nosy and she can look out the windows and bark at whatever she needs to bark at. And so I will pull in the driveway and she'll pop her little head up and she'll stand up on the table and she'll see me, and then I'll see her little tail begin to wag. And then as I approach the door, she jumps down and she runs over to the door, and I'm trying to put my key in, and she's just starting to jump. I mean, she is so excited to see me. And then once I come in, I mean, honestly, she's like a yo-yo, and it's like boing, boing, boing. I mean, she's just jumping. And this is no joke. She gets so excited. It's like she doesn't know what to do with all this enthusiasm, and she just spins around in circles. Like, I'm so happy. I just got to spin. I got to spin. And so I'm trying to get in. I'm talking to Caroline, speaking to the kids, and I'll go and I'll try to sit down. And all she wants to do is to get up in my lap, and she wants to lick my hand. She wants to lick my face. She is just so excited to see me, and she's telling me, "You are so wonderfully, wonderfully important." No, but isn't that the reason so many of us love dogs? Because a dog says to you, you're the most important person in the world, don't they? Dogs are really interested in you. Now, the truth is, there's a lot of stuff that we can do that dogs can't, but there's a lot of things that we can learn from a dog, isn't there? Listen to these words. Why should people be interested in you unless you're first interested in them? If we merely try to impress people and get them interested in us, we'll never have many true, sincere friends. Real friends, are not made that way. Now, those words were written in 1936, published in a book that, even if you haven't read, you're familiar with. They're the words of Dale Carnegie in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Now, Carnegie recognized that in 1936, but God sought to reveal it much earlier than that. We see it at operation in the life of Joseph. Individuals that believe only the positive about themselves, thinking that they're better and acting like they're better, when their egos get inflated, it begins to destroy relationships. It begins to divide families. It begins to hurt people. It begins to attack friendships, prevent them, destroy relationships with others. God wanted us to understand and not have to go through the school of hard knocks, and that is that if we want to be loved and if we want to have healthy relationships, we got to get rid of personal pride and inflated egos. But there's a final cost that we see in this passage, and that's this. An inflated ego results in obstructed communication. An inflated ego results in obstructed communication. Starting in verse 5, we're told of an experience that Joseph has, an experience that he's going to continue to have in the future that's going to play a prominent role in his life and experience. And that is that he has a dream. Actually, he has a couple of dreams that are recorded for us here. And if you're familiar with the rest of the story of Joseph's life, you are aware of the fact that are in on something that Joseph isn't at this point. These are not just random dreams that he has. These are not just his mind thinking crazy things as he sleeps and his mind unpacking at night. These are dreams that are given to him by God that function as visions of what's going to take place in the future. Now, we're told that the first dream that he has, and he tells his brothers about this. He says to his brothers, listen, there we're out in the fields, we're binding sheaves. So they're out cutting wheat. Once you get a stack, you're going to bind it together, and that's called a sheaf. And so Joseph has a sheaf, all of his brothers have a sheaf. They're all down on the ground, but all of a sudden Joseph's sheaf stands up, and all of his brothers' sheaves bow down before his sheaf. So they hear that, and they say in verse 8, yeah. So you're going to reign over us. Yeah, so you're going to have dominion over us. You fat chance. The end of verse 8, we're told they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. I mean, it was bad before, but he tells them this, and they hate him even more. That's the first dream. Verse 9, we're told he had still another dream. He tells this time not only his brothers, he tells his father. He says, I've dreamed another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me. Oh, really? Oh, that's nice. His father hears this, and he said, so my wife and I and all of your brothers, we're going to be just bowing down before you. Yeah, that's going to happen. You're going to reign over us. You're going to have dominion over us. Yeah, that's funny, Joseph. And his brothers hated him even more. This is easy to miss, but understand this. These dreams were given to Joseph by God, right? And if you're familiar with the remainder of Joseph's story, you know that these dreams are prophecies of what will actually take place. One day, they are all going to bow down before Joseph. He will, in fact, have dominion over them. God is revealing this to Joseph in a dream and through this vision. And as he seeks to communicate this to his brothers, he's trying to communicate what it is that God has revealed, but can they hear it? No. Why? Because they hate Joseph. Why do they hate him? Because Joseph thought he was and acted like, I'm better than the rest of you. Do you see what I'm saying in this? There are people that we could reach, people that we should reach with the truth about God. And we may be even effective in telling others about it. But when our heads are too big, they'll never hear it. They'll never pay attention to it. Let me paint the picture for you this way. I don't like driving behind tractor-trailer trucks. You probably don't either. But in particular, around town, I hate to get stuck behind one of them. And let's say you're out on Wendover and you're behind a tractor-trailer truck. They're aggravating because if you come to a red light and you're behind them, it takes them forever to kind of get into gear and up to speed, and cars are passing you on the other side, and you're just kind of putting along until that truck can get up to speed, or you can get in another lane to pass. That's aggravating. But beyond that, it's also aggravating if you are fairly close to a tractor-trailer and you're going down the road and you're approaching an intersection. Because you're not able to see what that truck driver is able to see. He's seeing, okay, the light is green, it's turned yellow, it's getting ready to turn red, and he's going through a yellow-orange light, right? And does this happen to you? You're following behind that truck. You couldn't see that the light turned red, and so you wind up running the red light. Why? Because the truck was so big, you couldn't see what you needed to. Because the truck is so big, you weren't able to know what you needed to know. Listen, there's a spiritual parallel to that as well. And that is when you and I operate as though we think we're better or act like we're better. When we have these inflated views of ourselves, and our heads get so big and our egos get so inflated, even if we are consistently sharing with people the truth about God and the claims about Jesus, they cannot hear it. They will not hear it because you are too big. It obstructs communication. Joseph wasn't aware of this, but thankfully later in the New Testament we see an example of somebody who who was aware. Do you remember the words of John the Baptist when Jesus comes onto the scene? He said, "You must increase and I must decrease." Listen, if people are ever going to be pointed to Him, if they're ever going to come to know Him, if we're to be a part of the process, it's got to be because our heads get smaller. We get a smaller hat. We begin to view ourselves not how everybody is telling us, all the positive stuff, not getting to a point where we act like and even believe that we're better than anybody else, but we see ourselves as we really are, warts and all. We've got strengths to be sure, but we've absolutely got weaknesses. And if there's any good thing that comes from me, it's because God does it through me. Listen, that's what God's looking for. It's that type of response. It's that type of life that He wants us to live. As I said, you've got a couple of options. You can figure this out on your own. You can go through life and have people talk behind you about your back. As soon as you walk out of the room, coworkers say, "Man, I can't stand them." Have family members, when you call and they see your name on caller ID, they're like, "Nobody touch it. Don't answer. Let it go to the answer machine." You can be the type of person that people avoid because you think and you act like you're better than everybody else. And you can experience the cost, and maybe, hopefully, before your life is over, you'll recognize it and make some changes. So you can figure this out on or through experience, through going through the school of hard knocks. Or you can say, "You know what? It's better Joseph went through that than me. I'm going to learn from his example, and I'm going to see if with God's help, I can get a smaller hat." Won't you bow your heads with me?